in order to produce a motion, any kind of motion, whether it's walking across your car or whether it's just swinging a golf club, a signal has to be generated from a part of the brain, one part of the brain. You have here a signal. It's basically an intent to create a motion, and that signal is sent from there to the brain. Now, there are two parts of the brain which we're concerned about when it comes to fluid motion. Let's just put it in here. There's the brain. Okay, this is not Da Vinci stuff. And there are two parts we're particularly concerned about. Is the prefrontal cortex. I'll initialize that as the PFC. Now, the prefrontal cortex is basically the CEO of the brain. It oversees all the functions of the brain, and it's also the discriminating intellect. The other part of the brain that we're particularly interested in is the motor system. I'll just initialize it as MS there. Now, when you're having one of those days where your ball striking is going really well, or your students having a great day where ball striking is going well, everything's falling into place nicely, what happens there is a signal, it goes from one part of the brain straight to the motor system. And the motor system is responsible for passing that signal on to the body. Here's the body. And if that signal is going direct to the motor system, that's when you have your great ball striking days. The problem comes in, and it can be a really nasty one. It can be a career-threatening one for anybody playing golf or whatever sport it is professionally. The problem comes in when the prefrontal cortex, for whatever reason, interrupts that signal. It butts in and says, what's going on here? There's reasons why it would do that, but for the moment, let's just concentrate on that. What happens then is a slight delay in the signal getting to the motor system and slight delay in it getting to the body. The body has no intellect of its own. Basically, it works on instructions from the brain. Now, what happens is the body gets halfway through a motion, prefrontal cortex interrupts the signal, and the body is waiting for a signal to come from the motor system. It's not forthcoming, and what happens then is the body automatically engages the heavier core bulk muscles of the body, and that's when you get the over-the-top stuff and the pull and that sort of ugly stuff happening in your shoot. Now, just to illustrate how important fluid motion is and how it happens in every sport, is basically if you were to speak to 100 different sportsmen of different disciplines, and you said to them, what happened when you had really good games? Everything went according to plan. And you can boil down their answers to three things. Basically, first of all, time slowed down. Okay, time slowed right down. Nobody comes off a golf course after shooting a career-based round and says, "Oh, everything was rushed. It was really I didn't have time to think about anything. I was in such a rush. I had to get it over with." What's happening there is what happens when the prefrontal cortex interrupts the signal is the neurons in the brain that control time, in the prefrontal cortex, should I say, overshadow the neurons in the motor system, and basically it speeds up time, or the perception of time, it's sped up. Okay. When the signal is going directly to the motor system and you've got no interference from the prefrontal cortex, time slows right down and it's left to its own devices. The motor system is left to its own devices. Next thing that happens, that everyone will tell you, is that the intellect shuts down. Okay? Intellect shut down completely. There was no thinking happening. Things were just happening, and it was completely automatic. It was completely natural. There was no forced. There was nothing forced about it. There was no thinking going on. There was no. Didn't get to the top and say, "Oh, what must I do now? Where must I go?" It just happened. Okay. Third thing that happened was that the motion was effortless. Now, write this down. This is really important. The point of this whole exercise of going through the theory of this is when we get out onto the range, I'll be referring back to particularly a signal going to the motor system. You're not going to get a comprehensive understanding of how the body is working or how the brain is working without this theory background. Okay, when we talk about motion becoming motion felt effortless, and he comes out and says it was really a strain. I was really battling to do anything. It just happened. Now, that happens when the cerebellum, there are three parts to the motor system. The one particular part that we're really interested in is the cerebellum. I'll initialize it here as a C. The cerebellum is where the secret sauce lies. This is the good stuff here. First of all, the cerebellum is able to do three things. First thing it does is it fires the fast twitch muscles. Okay? Fast twitch muscles are the ones you need at the bottom of the swing when it comes into just before compact or impact with the ball. Before contact is the word I was looking for with the ball. Get that flick through to get your club head speed up. And to square up the club, of course. The second thing it does is it can track the motion. The cerebellum can track the thing. When you get up there and you're feeling a little bit funky, it's tracking that thing. It's tracking that motion and knows that you don't want to be in that funky position, and it can actually self-correct the motion. Just leave it alone, it'll self-correct itself, it'll come down and give you a totally acceptable result at the end. The third thing it can do, and it really is, the cerebellum is gold. It smooths out the motion. Smooths it out completely, so you don't get any jerkiness at the top. There's no jerking, pulling away, there's no ugliness at the top of the backswing. Just a quick aside, with a lot of students that I've been dealing with, some of them will come to me with little funky things at the top of the swing, like a little loop at the top of the backswing before they start the downswing, or there'll be an extra pull, an extra lift just before that. When the cerebellum is engaged, that disappears completely. That jerkiness and that funny little twitches, those funny little twitches all disappear, and the swing's completely smooth. When I show them their videos afterwards, they can't believe the change in it. Okay, hopefully that's all understood. Now we'll move on to the next one. We'll get out of the way. Now I'd like to talk about basically muscle memory. You know all about muscle memory, I'm sure. 10,000 swings and the muscles all remember where they should be at the right time. That's not correct. There's no memory stored in the muscles at all. Muscle memory is actually stored in the basal ganglia. That's a part of the brain, another part of the brain that we're looking at. Okay, and the basal ganglia, or muscle memory, is a little bit like a bank account. In fact, it's very much like a bank account. If you want to get some money into a bank, into your bank account, savings account, you put in £100 every month for X amount of time. Eventually, you've got £1,000 saved away, and then it's going to be there for as long as you want it to be. It'll be there in 10 years' time. At £10,000 will still be there. Now, what muscle memory does not break down. That's it. That's a very interesting part. I found that quite incredible. But it doesn't break down. It's always going to be there for you. What does break down is our ability to access that muscle memory that's stored in the basal ganglia. Now, this is, everybody accesses muscle memory in the same way. It's like the rules of the bank. If you go into the bank, you want to access your £1,000. You go to the teller machine outside the bank, and you put your card in, and it gives you instructions. If you follow those instructions to the letter, you will have access to your £1,000. If you don't do that, if you put in the wrong PIN code or you press the wrong button, you're not going to get access to your £1,000. So you go inside and you say to the teller behind the counter, I couldn't get access to my £1,000. And the teller will tell you, you must have violated the rules of the bank. And that's where our ability to access the muscle memory comes from. That's where the problem comes in. We're violating the rules of the bank. As an example, let's just say, here's your pathway here's your pathway to the basal ganglia. Now you get up in the morning and you're ready to go off down to golf, and basically you have a little argument with the missus, and when you're driving to the course, somebody cuts you off or something, or something irritates you in the way there. You get there, you get a couple of balls, and you go down to the range and you start hitting balls with your driver, and you hit beautiful high soft fades. You're really happy with that. You then get up to the first tee box, and guess what? The shot doesn't call for a high soft fade, it calls for a draw. The hole is shaped. It doesn't fit your eye the way you were hoping it would do when you were down on the driving range. Now, you take these things, add it together. You take the little argument with the wife, argument in the traffic, and you take you take the sudden panic when you stand on the tee box and you see you've got a high soft fade. And these are all going to be barriers in the pathway to the basal ganglia, to accessing your muscle memory. You've got to somehow get rid of those. And now, the rules for getting to muscle memory and to access fluid motion, the rules are for everyone, the same for everyone. Whether you're a 20 handicapper, or whether you're the best golfer in the world, or whether you're winning every week on the PGA Tour, the rules are going to be exactly the same. Okay? Just remember that it's quite important. It's pretty important. Right, let's get away with that. Now, next one I want to get on to is the mind-body connection. Everybody has a mind of your own, and everybody has a body. Some are in better condition than others. Now, the mind has surface levels, and the body has surface levels. The surface levels of the brain are a little bit like, if you on the surface levels, it's the brain. You can access the core bulky muscles of the body. On the surface levels, those are the muscles you can access quite easily. A little bit like let's do it almost like a sea. A good analogy I use is if you can imagine yourself in a storm, at sea, and it's all, the waves are chopping and really rough, and the rain is lashing down, the wind's blowing, and it's really, you need core muscles to stay on the surface. But if you go down to the quieter levels of the mind, if you go 300 foot down below the surface of the sea, it's very quiet and peaceful down there. There's no noise or rough seas, anything like that, or wind. It's nice and quiet and everything's peaceful. Now, as soon as you get down, the brain's much the same. As soon as you get down to the quieter levels of the mind, you're going to be able to access the fast twitch muscles. You're going to be able to get the cerebellum working and doing the tracking and self-correcting. And you're going to have you're going to be able to access it smooth motion. Okay? Basically, if you, there's an analogy regarding Tiger when he was playing in Bay Hill going for his 72nd, I think it was, his 72nd win on the PGA Tour. It was 72nd, you know. Most guys, if most PGA Tour players, if they have 5 wins in a career, they're happy with it. Tiger with 72 is equivalent to about 30 players. But basically 72, 71, 72, it doesn't really matter. It's not a big deal. And he shot the lights out at Bay Hill and he won going away. Then a couple of weeks later, he's down at Augusta National. And he's going for his 15th, not his 72nd, his 15th major win. It's a big deal. He's chasing 18. He really needs that 15. All of a sudden, he's at Bay Hill. All his thoughts were down here, nice and calm and quiet, and he's accessing his fast twitch muscles. He gets to Augusta, and suddenly it's 15th major win. It's a big deal, and thoughts go up to the surface level, and he's not able to access that, and he really struggles. That has happened time and time again. Okay, with swing thoughts, you have a swing thought that comes from the surface level of the mind, it's not going to work for you. If the swing thought comes from the quieter levels of the mind, it's going to work for you every time. It's not what you think, what you're thinking. It's where that thought is coming from. If it's coming from a quiet part of the mind, quiet level of the mind, it'll work nicely for you. Right?